On a blazing afternoon in Scottsdale, Arizona, a man in a faded gray hoodie and scuffed sneakers quietly stepped out of a modest SUV at the back lot of Prestige Motors. To anyone watching, he looked like just another curious customer. Someone who probably wandered in, lured by the shine of luxury cars through glass walls. But what no one knew was this. That man was Darrell Carter, the new owner of the dealership. Darrell wasn't there to shake hands or make a speech. He didn't want the red carpet. He wanted the truth, raw and unfiltered. That's why he left the tailored suits at home and walked into his own showroom looking like any middle-class shopper. His goal? To see how his team treated people when they thought no one important was watching. As he walked inside, the cool air hit his skin, along with something else: judgment. Quick glances, whispering eyes, the unmistakable shift in tone that comes when people assume you don't belong. And then came Susan. Polished, confident, and sharp-tongued, she wasted no time sizing him up. "Can I help you?" she asked, tight smile in place, eyes skimming his hoodie like it insulted the air. "Just browsing," Darrell said calmly. Susan tilted her head, skeptical. "These vehicles start at 6 figures. You might want to check out our pre-owned lot." She didn't ask about his needs. She didn't ask his name. She assumed, judged, dismissed. Darrell didn't argue. He just listened, observed. Let her keep digging a hole with every polite insult disguised as professionalism. Then, with perfect timing, he asked to speak with the owner. Susan almost laughed. "They don't take walk-ins," she said. That's when Darrell pulled out his phone. "I'll call them myself." Moments later, the dealership's regional director walked in, eyes locking on Darrell with a warm smile. "Mr. Carter, always a pleasure." The entire room shifted. Susan's clipboard nearly dropped. She turned pale as realization set in. The man she had treated like a nuisance was her new boss. Darrell didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "Let's talk." What followed was more than a team meeting. It was a reckoning. Darrell made it clear, respect wasn't optional, and from now on, this dealership would serve people, not perceptions. He wasn't there just to sell cars. He was there to lead change. And that change started with seeing beyond appearances. Because in that quiet moment, one hoodie revealed everything a suit could never show. The glass-walled conference room of Prestige Motors had never felt this tense. Normally reserved for weekly sales targets and inventory reviews, today it was the stage for something far more important. Darrell Carter, no longer the mysterious man in a hoodie, but the newly revealed owner of the dealership, stood at the head of the table. His presence was calm, but the weight of the moment hung thick in the air. A few staff members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others stared at the table, avoiding eye contact. Susan, the manager who had dismissed Darrell only moments earlier based on his appearance, sat in the back, her clipboard now clutched like a shield. The usual dealership buzz was gone. Replacing it was a heavy silence, the kind that follows a storm, or maybe the kind that comes just before change. "Thank you all for being here," Darrell began, his voice measured but unmistakably firm. "Some of you just met me under less than ideal circumstances." There were no smiles, no chuckles, just wide eyes and uneasy expressions. "I walked into this dealership today dressed like someone who didn't belong, and that was the point. I didn't come to test you. I came to see you, to understand what kind of culture lives behind the polished cars and sales scripts." He let the words settle before continuing. "And what I saw was disappointing, a visible flinch from Susan, a quiet shuffle from another manager. I wasn't respected because I didn't look like someone who could afford a car here. That tells me everything I need to know about how a regular customer, one without a 6-figure outfit, might be treated." Darrell stepped forward, resting his hands on the table. "Let me be clear. That ends today." The silence cracked just slightly. A murmur from the back, a cough from someone near the window. This dealership will no longer run on assumptions. It will run on respect. It doesn't matter what someone wears, what car they drive, what accent they speak with. If they walk through those doors, they are to be treated with dignity. Full stop. He paused again, locking eyes with several employees. And if anyone has a problem with that, this might not be the right place for you. Susan slowly raised her hand, her voice trembling. Mr. Carter, I made a mistake. I misjudged you, and I'm truly sorry. Darrell nodded, his tone softer now. I appreciate your honesty, Susan, but this isn't just about me. It's about every person we've misjudged before today. He turned back to the room. Moving forward, we'll be retraining our team, bias training, customer care standards, regular evaluations. I didn't buy this dealership to maintain the status quo. I bought it to build something better. And with that, a new chapter at Prestige Motors began. One not driven by sales quotas, but by something far more powerful: integrity. The next morning, Prestige Motors looked the same on the outside: polished glass, gleaming cars, and pristine marble floors. But something had shifted inside. For the first time in years, a genuine sense of accountability stirred beneath the surface. Darrell Carter sat in his new office, not the corner one with sweeping views, but a modest room overlooking the service bay. He had chosen it on purpose. If I can't see the work, I'm too far from it, he'd told the operations team. Now he was ready to begin the real transformation. The first step? Training. Not the kind with cheesy slideshows and scripted role-play, but real, honest conversations about bias, respect, and what it means to serve. Darrell didn't want quick fixes. He wanted the foundation of the dealership to shift. So he partnered with a diversity consultant, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Marla Simmons, who had helped reshape Fortune 500 companies. She didn't believe in sugarcoating. Neither did he. When Marla arrived, she met with Darrell privately. "What's your goal?" she asked, arms folded. "Change the way my team sees people," Darrell replied without hesitation. "Including themselves." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Then we'll need more than a workshop. We'll need a culture reset." Darrell agreed and made sure every single employee, from sales to janitorial, would be required to attend the sessions. No one would be exempt, including him. Especially him. The first training session opened in silence. Employees filed in, unsure of what to expect. Susan sat in the front this time, a quiet, unspoken act of accountability. Marla stepped forward and broke the ice. "Let's start with a question," she said. "What comes to mind when you see a man in a hoodie walk into a luxury dealership?" No one answered at first. Then slowly hands began to rise. "Delivery guy. Window shopper. Someone wasting our time." Marla nodded after each one. Then she clicked the remote. A photo of Darrell in his hoodie from just days before flashed on the screen. "That man," she said, "owns this building. Now, let's talk about why no one saw him for who he really was." There were uncomfortable shifts in seats, a few lowered eyes. But this was the moment Darrell wanted. Honest discomfort. Week after week, the sessions continued, unpacking unconscious bias, examining sales language, and practicing active listening. Darrell showed up to everyone. He sat in the back, took notes, and sometimes even spoke. "We don't sell cars here," he said once. "We sell trust, and that starts with how you treat the first person who walks in the door, not the one who shows you their bank account." The message landed. Slowly, behavior began to change. Salespeople greeted everyone. Receptionists no longer sized up customers by their outfits. And perhaps most importantly, they started listening. Really listening. Because change doesn't start with a speech. It starts with someone willing to live it. And Darrell, he was just getting started. The final Friday of the month arrived with an unusual stillness. The midday sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Prestige Motors conference room, casting soft rays on the polished table. Every chair was filled. The entire staff, sales, service, finance, and even custodians, had been invited, but not for another compliance meeting. No, this was something different. Darrell Carter stood at the front, a quiet intensity in his eyes. Gone was the hoodie from that first visit. Today, he wore a simple navy blazer and a black shirt. Still understated, still him. He looked around the room, his hands resting on the table before he spoke. I know the last few weeks have been uncomfortable for some of you. Change often is. But today I want to tell you why this matters to me. The room quieted, the tension shifting from uncertainty to curiosity. I didn't buy this dealership just because I could. I bought it because of a promise I made. To someone who never had the chance to walk into a place like this and be treated with dignity. He paused, his voice thickening. My father, Raymond Carter, was a mechanic for over 30 years. A damn good one. He worked hard, loved cars, and dreamed of owning something one day. Maybe a shop, maybe more. But every time he walked into a dealership, especially one like this, they didn't see a customer. They saw a man who didn't belong. A few heads bowed slightly. Others remained frozen, listening. I was 10 when I first saw it, Darrell continued, his gaze distant. We walked into a showroom. Nicer than this one, actually. He was finally ready to buy a used Lexus. He'd saved for years. But the salesman never asked his name, never showed him a car, just pointed to the used lot out back and said, "Your kind usually shops over there." I'll never forget the way my father stood there, hurt but proud. He turned to me and said, "Son, if you ever get the chance, change the game." Darrell smiled faintly, brushing his knuckle along the edge of the table. This dealership isn't just about selling cars. It's about rewriting that story, for my father, and for every person who's ever been made to feel small because of what they wore, how they spoke, or where they came from. He scanned the room, his voice steady but deep with emotion. If you're here for a paycheck, that's fine. But if you want to be part of something that matters, something bigger than just numbers, then I'm inviting you to help me build it. Silence. Then, softly, a clap. It came from the back, then another. And soon the room was filled with applause. Not polite, not forced, but real. Darrell nodded once, slowly. "Let's get back to work," he said. "But this time, let's do it right." And with that, the culture at Prestige Motors shifted. Not just because of policy, but because of purpose. 1 month later, the air inside Prestige Motors felt different. Darrell Carter stepped through the glass doors, unnoticed at first. This time, he wore a clean polo and slacks, not to test anyone, not to make a statement, but simply to observe. And what he saw brought a faint smile to his face. Gone were the hushed whispers when someone didn't look the part. Gone was the stiff air of exclusivity that once cloaked the showroom like a designer suit. In its place was warmth, authentic and earned. The front desk greeted each guest with genuine enthusiasm. Sales associates moved with purpose, not performance. But what caught Darrell's eye most stood just beyond the reception area. Susan. The same Susan who once handed him a list of used cars without a second thought. Now she stood beside a new trainee, young, nervous, dressed in a thrifted blazer 2 sizes too big. And she wasn't just walking him through the sales system, she was talking about dignity. "Every person who walks through that door," Susan said, her voice firm yet encouraging, "deserves to be treated like they belong, because they do. We don't judge by shoes, hoodies, or accents. We listen. We respect. Got it?" The trainee nodded, wide-eyed. Susan caught sight of Darrell then, just briefly, but her reaction wasn't panic. It wasn't shame. It was pride. She offered him a nod, soft and sure, and returned to her lesson. Darrell stood still for a moment, letting the scene sink in. This was why he'd bought the dealership. Not just to prove a point, not just to fulfill a promise to his father, but to create a space where change didn't just come from a policy binder. It lived in the people. It breathed through every handshake, every "how can I help you?" every quiet choice to treat someone like a human being. Alex, the regional director, appeared at Darrell's side. "She's turned around completely," he said, watching Susan from across the room. "Leads team meetings now. Helped rewrite our customer service scripts. Even had a tough talk with an associate who made a snide remark last week. She shut it down." Darrell nodded slowly. "That's the power of a second chance," he murmured. As the sun dipped over Scottsdale's horizon, the showroom hummed with quiet energy. Not of luxury and exclusivity, but of purpose. The cars still gleamed under the spotlights, but now they were just part of the story. The real value sat in the hearts of the people inside. And Darrell? He didn't need applause. The look in Susan's eyes, the change in the air, was all the validation he needed. This was no longer just Prestige Motors. It was a new standard. It started with a single post, a blurry photo of Darrell Carter standing beside a luxury SUV at Prestige Motors, smiling humbly beside a team of employees. Captioned, "The man in the hoodie turned out to be the owner, and he changed everything." Within hours, it spread like wildfire. Major business outlets picked up the story. Headlines like, "From Hoodie to Hero, How One Owner Transformed a Dealership's Culture," and "When the Boss Walks In Unnoticed and Walks Out with Respect," dominated news feeds. But the comments, that's where the heart of the conversation lived. Some readers praised Darrell for his restraint, how he didn't lash out when Susan judged him, how he didn't fire anyone to prove a point. Others admitted their own guilt, reflecting on moments when they'd sized someone up based on clothes, tone, or skin color. On LinkedIn, thousands of entrepreneurs reshared the story, using it to spark discussions about implicit bias, corporate culture, and leadership with integrity. One CEO wrote, "Darrell Carter didn't just buy a dealership. He bought a mirror and held it up to all of us." But it wasn't just the business world talking. Community leaders, diversity consultants, and even students used the story in classrooms and conferences. The simple, powerful premise, a man walks into his own dealership and is told he doesn't belong, struck a nerve in a world still reckoning with how often appearances outweigh substance. Darrell received hundreds of messages. Some were from strangers who thanked him for standing tall with grace. Others came from employees at other dealerships, asking how they could create the same shift in culture. A few came from executives who confessed they'd been inspired and challenged. And through it all, Darrell remained quiet. He didn't chase the spotlight. He didn't launch a brand or write a memoir. Instead, he showed up to work, every day, walking the floors, shaking hands, listening, guiding. He knew the story wasn't about him. It was about what happens when you lead with respect, when you choose to teach instead of punish, and when you trust that even those who've made mistakes, like Susan, can rise to the occasion if given a chance. Prestige Motors became a case study in modern leadership, not because of a PR campaign, but because one man decided to wear a hoodie and see the truth for himself. And when he didn't just change a team. He changed the conversation. Sometimes the most powerful change doesn't come from grand speeches or sweeping reforms. It comes from quiet action, steady presence, and the willingness to listen. Darrell Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam doors. He simply showed people who he was, through how he responded, not how he reacted. For those of us who've lived through decades of watching the world struggle with fairness and judgment, Darrell's story is a reminder. It's never too late to lead by example. It's never too late to stand for dignity. Whether you're 70 or 17, you still have the power to influence the world around you by choosing respect over assumption, patience over pride, and compassion over control. The world doesn't change in a day, but it does shift each time someone chooses to see people, not for what they wear or how they speak, but for who they are. We may not all own a dealership, but we all own our actions. And that, more than anything, is where real change begins.